Welcome to the Everything Podcast. This episode I'm recapping Dark Gallifrey, The Meddling Monks Part 2, which was actually released today. The date I'm recording this episode is the 14th of May 2026. Because of its shorter runtime compared to other Big Finish releases, that's why I've been able to listen to it and record the episode in the same day. I think I did something, basically, it was either the day of or the next day. For the Meddling Monks Part 1, which I have already recapped, so if you want, I would suggest checking that out before you check out this episode, because it is one story just across 3 releases, released 3 months. So, as I do with all my Big Finish recaps, I'm going to talk about what we know, show you the trailer, and then I'll let you know my thoughts, which obviously will contain spoilers. That bit, the other bit won't. So let's start off. So the writer of Dark Gallifrey, The Meddling Monks Part 2 and the Dark Gallifrey, The Meddling Monks in its entirety is John Dorney. And we have the synopsis. So, the Meddling Monk and the Meddling Nun are stranded on Earth with their broken TARDIS and find themselves involved in a series of odd escapades, each more onerous than expected, but the greatest challenge is still to come. We start off with Monkey Nuts. It's time to host the neighbours for an evening soiree, but is the monks' fish dish a winner, or will their guests prefer the nun's baby chicken? There's only one way to find out, and soon culinary battle has commenced. What could possibly go wrong? We then have Monkey Magic. There's a big prize to be won at the local talent show, so the monk and the nun are soon brushing up their best stage acts in an attempt to claim victory and ensure the success of their grand plan. What can possibly go wrong? Dark Gallifrey, The Meddling Monks Part 2 was recorded on the 10th, 14th and 21st of November 2025, with writer John Dorney said the concept of the trilogy was there pretty much from the inception of Dark Gallifrey. I've been thinking about something like this for ages, because I started my career in radio comedy. I thought it would be a really fun idea to play with, and it very much was. I really love the monk and indeed the nun, a character I even loved even as a kid, because one of my earliest experiences of Doctor Who was in the early 90s when they repeated The Time Meddler on BBC Two. The monk is dodgy and mischievous rather than out and out evil, and that's interesting to play with, and I adore Gemma and Rufus's performances. The nun is a bit sharper than this incarnation of the monk, and leaning into that gives an interesting dynamic between the two. I was determined to keep these guys together as much as possible, because that's where all the post jokes land. They are really funny people. The Dark Gallifrey, The Meddling Monks Part 2 includes Rufus Hound as the monk and Gemma Whelan as the nun. And the script editor was Matt Fitton. As I said, the writer was John Dorney. The senior producer was John Ainsworth. The cover art was done by Soundsmith Creative. The director and sound designer was Jonathan S. Powell. The executive producers were James Tegeder and Nicholas Briggs. The music was done by Kevin James. The producer was Robert Valentine. And the total runtime for the Dark Gallifrey, The Meddling Monks Part 2 is 74 minutes. So before I spoil the event of Dark Gallifrey, The Meddling Monks Part 2, here's the trailer.
From Big Finish Productions, The Worlds of Doctor Who, Dark Gallifrey, The Meddling Monks Part 2.
He's a monk, she's a nun. How the troubles must weigh a ton.
Hey, nun! Look what I found in the town centre. No, that was definitely music that time.
You're right.
She's a nun, he's a monk. Every plan's turned out as junk.
Something very strange is happening here.
A world where everyone's called John and looks the same, has invisible wives and doesn't behave in a remotely rational manner.
Nothing could make sense of that.
The punters do love to see something a bit modern, a bit avant-garde.
They're certainly having the last laugh.
This is not a joking matter.
Believe me, I'm not joking. We're on next. Have you still been laughed at too?
Yes, but I didn't want to.
Sorry about that. We appear to have hit a bit of a snag with this week's episode of The Meddling Monks. We'll have them back with you as soon as we can work out what the problem actually was. Oh, well, you'll be glad to know we fixed the issue with this week's episode. So once again, I give you The Meddling Monks.
Let's give a cheer, enjoy the Meddling Monks. The Meddling Monks.
Big Finish, for the love of stories.
That was the trailer for Dark Gallifrey, The Meddling Monks Part 2, which obviously follows on from Part 1. But I'm going to enter spoiler territory, especially discussing the ending of Episode 4, Monkey Magic as well. Especially. So if you've not listened to Dark Gallifrey, The Meddling Monks Part 2 and want to, then please do so. It's now available from Big Finish, so go check that out. obviously, if you've already listened to it like I have, or don't mind being sports, then please stay. So without further ado, here's my recap of Dark Gallifrey, the Meddling Monks Part 2. So we start off with Monkey Nuts, which is kind of the dinner party one episode, with kind of the monk and the nun going back to their old tricks from Part 1 with kind of being competitive, with episode 1 focusing on buying a house and episode 2 focusing on getting a job, and obviously the dinner party here. And covering over this episode, I think, is the more comedic one out of the two, even though episode 4, Monkey Magic, is still quite comedic, but there's a bit more going on in that one. Even though they are the same, that's a 25-minute episode, so it does it quite quickly. But kind of there's loads of references to fridges and ovens, and the monk and the nun getting confused because obviously they're Time Lords, they're not used to how Earth works and kind of that. And then we meet another iteration of John, that being a cousin of the other Johns that we met in Part 1, who has a wife called Caroline who scares the bejesus out of the monk and the nun on several bases, and we learn that she's got an allergy to nuts, and then they get a takeaway that kind of the nun kind of attacks from the monk when this is mentioned, and Caroline actually dies, but this John doesn't seem too fussed with that really, and isn't emotional about it, and it just kind of is like, oh, it is what it is a little bit, which isn't obviously a normal reaction to that. So yeah, it's interesting to see that. Then we move on to Monkey Magic, which is where the monk and the nun kind of have worked out that something isn't quite right, and that they're being kind of made to go off against each other. And obviously with how with this happened, that they decide to have a talent show act together, and they decide on magic rather than dancing with the nun, as insulting the monk's dancing ability. But yeah, they do that, and then they meet the kind of person that is kind of in charge of organising the talent show, and kind of chooses that the monk has to saw the nun in half, and it ends up with the monk and nun actually not going on board, and they meet Simon, who kind of is pretending, if you do those tongue twisters and vocal warm up, and then they realise that something really isn't going on, and the kind of at the end, it goes back to the start of Part 1, where the nun and the monk mentioned that they've kind of have done something called the Brigamich something or other. It's not the easiest thing to pronounce, that kind of, because they're the same person but two incarnations. It's like if in multi-doctor stories or multi-master stories things go wrong, because you shouldn't see yourself be in events with yourself. Obviously as humans we can't really relate to that, because we don't have several incarnations, unfortunately. That's not the way humans work, but Time Lords do, to the point where actually at the end the cliffhanger actually of Part 2 is that the monk and the nun have contacted the Doctor, because they're in that much trouble. They're stuck in the TARDIS, and they're being, the audience the promoter gets the audience who seem to be some kind of zombies, or flesh-eating zombies of some description, that kind of are asked to hunt for the monk and the nun, and are trapped in their TARDIS. So they call out they send a distress signal to the Doctor, but we don't know which Doctor, even though that may have been spoiled in the behind the scenes, but I'm not going to mention that, just in case A, that's wrong, or B, it wasn't worth to be mentioned, because it's only mentioned once. So yeah, we've not had the cover or an announcement for it for Part 3 yet. That will be coming, I would assume, pretty soon. It could even be today, really. But yeah, it's interesting to see how that works, and we'll see how what Part 3 brings you. But without further ado, that's kind of it, I think. So let me know what you thought of Dark Gallifrey, the Meddling Monks Part 2. Also Part 1, Parts 1 and 2 if you've listened to them, my recaps if you didn't. And without further ado, I will see you in the future episode of the podcast. See you then. Goodbye.